Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and the Canadian Quilting Association is having a really big quilting bee this year, and their goal is to make quilts for the Ronald McDonald House. Now, this is a great cause, but what is also great is the pattern is free, and it is a slab block. Now, this block is great for using up any leftover fabric you have. It's great for any charities that you want to do. It is just a great, big, fun block to make. The block ends up being 12.5 inches, and there's no measurements until you trim it down. Let me show you how easy it is to make this block. It's from the book called Sunday Morning Quilts. The book is all full of patterns where you're able to use up all of your little scraps. It even has a pattern to make a box out of scrap fabric for your scrap fabric. But today we're going to make the Missing U, better known as the slab block. Here's the free downloadable pattern, and I'll give you a link so that you can download it. The block is from Cheryl Arkison, and because the Canadian Quilting Association is doing this to represent Canada's 150th birthday, they're asking that there's going to be at least one piece of some type of Canadian fabric somewhere in the block. So if you're making it for your charity, you can do it any way you want. But if you're going to participate in this, you need to have one piece of Canadian fabric. So you can actually make just one block or a whole quilt and send it off. I'll put a link in the description to everything. What's also really nice is they've come with their own labels so that you can put labels on the back of the Canadian quilts. I've printed them on these fabric sheets, so I'm just going to be able to cut, and I'll have 4 labels to go. So this is basically what a slab block looks like. There's no real rhyme or reason. It's just a matter of keeping it flat so that it's not distorted. And each block is going to look totally different from the next block. Let's get started. So the fabric I'm going to use is from a leftover project from fabric from Northcott. Now this fabric is celebrating Canada's 150th birthday, so it's perfect for this project. So I have pieces that are just leftovers, all different sizes. So what we need to do is combine all of these, some matching fabric in the solid lines. This is also from Northcott, and it's very easy. You're going to start with 2 pieces of fabric and you're going to sew them together, and it doesn't matter what size. Because I have some small sizes, that's what I'm going to start with. So I've sewn 2 together. From there, we're going to build to the block. And you can build by adding 1 piece on the end or a double piece on the end. And the double piece, what I've done is I've taken strips and I've sewn them together with whatever was left over. And I also have these long, thin pieces. They're going to turn out great inside the block. So I've taken them and I've sewn the small ones onto other pieces. And I've even sewn 3 together so that I have a nice piece to work with. And once they're all pressed, I'm ready to go. I'm going to start with the piece that I've sewn 2 pieces together. It doesn't have to be square. It just needs 1 straight line. So I'm going to just take this piece and I'm going to straighten 1 edge. And that's the edge I'm going to sew the next block on. Now there are a couple of different ways you can do this. You can just sew the pieces on and then trim the seam allowances after. I like to trim my seam allowances first. Keeps it nice and straight that way. So I am just going to make that line straight. I'm not worried about anything else. So I have my 1 straight edge. Now I can sew a piece of fabric or a double strip onto that edge. So I'm going to take a piece that I've already sewn together at a double strip. This saves a little time, and I'm going to use that 1 straight edge along the sewing machine foot so that I can maintain a 1/4 inch on this piece. I'm not worried about the other piece. So I'm going to take that straight edge, flip it over, and then I can just cut off that piece. And I'm not worried about trying to measure it with a ruler. I'm just going to cut it off, and I can bring that to the machine and sew a 1/4 inch. And when that seam has been sewn, I'm just going to take that and I'm going to press that right to one side. It really doesn't matter what side you press it to. When that's pressed, I want to trim one more edge straight. And it doesn't matter what size you go on, because eventually you're going to trim this all down anyways. So I'm going to take one side and cut it straight. And I'm not worried about the rest of the seam allowances, just that one edge. Now that is going to be my next edge that I'm going to stitch on. And because I have a leftover block, which is going to be close to this size, I'm going to use that block. Even though it's not going to fit, I'm going to be able to trim it down. So I'm going to find a spot that I feel is comfortable, flip it over, and stitch that 1/4 inch. When it's on, press it. Now I need one more side, and I'm going to use one of the sides where I have that shorter block on so that I can trim it off. So I'll trim off this edge here. But if you want to, you can do the other edge. Using that line, I get to put another piece on. Now, if you're going to make more than one of these, you can just bring them to the machine and chain piece them. So I have some blocks ready to go. Some have 3 pieces, some have more, and I like to vary them. So I have a nice long strip, and I'm going to be able to take that straight edge and put it along one of my edges. And it's not important that the bottom piece be straight, because you are going to follow the straight line that you trimmed on the block. You don't follow the outside piece, you're going to follow the top piece. So I'm going to be able to put this piece on, and the next piece, and the next piece, and go all the way down. Now I'm going to be able to cut these apart. And you don't need to use the rotary cutter. Your scissors are going to work fine. I'm just going to cut right between those blocks and separate them. This will really speed up making this quilt. And if there's a lot of seam allowance, you can just trim it off to the 1/4 inch. But if it's not a lot, you can leave it. Now I'm going to take this whole stack to the iron and press them out. When it's been pressed, I'm going to find one more edge and straighten it up. And by only straightening up one edge at a time, you're going to be able to change the sizes as you go along. You can even use fabric that's not straight. Because you're going to use the one straight edge, you'll be able to trim it off after. The whole idea is I'm going to want to take that edge of my foot and follow the straight line. I'm not going to worry about any of that ragged edge. That ragged edge is going to be trimmed off after. And it's not important what the piece looks like inside. It can be on an angle. The important thing is one straight edge. And I'm going to be able to build on this so that it's going to go out on all 4 sides. By always starting with one straight edge, the quilt block is always going to remain flat. So each time you go to add a piece, you only need one straight edge. You can add big pieces, and you can even add strips that are already pieced. And when your blocks are a little bit more than 12.5 inches, I would recommend to take them to the iron, give them a little bit of a starch and a really good press so that they lay nice and flat. Take a 12.5 inch square ruler and trim off the 4 edges so that the block equals 12.5 inches. And when the trimming is done, you've made a slab block. And they're all different. But even those little pieced blocks that you had left over, or even the pieces that you had to add, will add charm and make the quilt a lot of fun. And when you go to sew them together, if you want to make a large quilt, you're going to sew 4 blocks together, and you will need to make 6 rows. If you're going to make a smaller block, you're going to sew 3 together, and you're only going to have 4 rows. The large one will be 48.5 inches by 72.5 inches, and the small one is going to be 36.5 inches by 48.5 inches. And this is such a fun looking quilt. And when the quilt is done, it still has a bit of a traditional feel with a little bit of modern. I guess you could call it traditionally modern. It is a quick and easy block to make. It's a great block for charities, and it's a great block of using up all of your scraps. Little, big, even pieced. And if you want to send a block in, I'll put a link in the description to the Canadian Quilting Bee because anyone can send a block in. And I'll also put a link in to Cheryl's website so you can check out her pattern. It is a great block. I do hope you give it a try. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.